Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Vantage Live Analysis session. Right, so we will just wait for about 1 to 2 more minutes for more people to stream in before we get the session started. So as always, right, if you guys have any questions, please put them under the questions chat. So you can either put them under the Q&A box or the questions chat. So let's just wait for about 1 to 2 more minutes, right? At the same time, right, let me just bring up my screen. Okay, so you guys should be able to see my screen. Okay. Okay, so for those of you guys who just joined, right, welcome. Let me just bring up the questions chat as well as the Q&A chat as well so that I can see the questions that you guys have. So if you guys have any chat requests as well, right, do put them under the questions chat. So for today, I'll be going through mainly on Euro dollar and pound dollar, as well as the review of the calls that were made on Wednesday. Okay, so let's get the session started. Right, so for those of you guys who just joined, a big welcome. So if you guys have any questions, right, do put them under the questions chat. And if you have any chart requests as well that you want us to take a look at. So just a brief introduction of myself, right? I'm Lee Sing, so I provide FX advisory to institutional clients. I'm also part of the team that's recognized by the Technical Analyst Awards for the best FX research for 4 consecutive years, right? And I'm also on LinkedIn. So if you guys have any questions, especially when you're watching the recording for the analysis done on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, right? You can either, if you have the questions now, right, do put them under the chat. If not, right, you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. So just a quick disclaimer before we get the session started. The information presented here is not to be treated as investment advice. It's for educational purposes only. So this would be the agenda that we're covering for today, right? So for a start, we will hop on to the economic calendar just to see what are the key news data released for today. So as always, right, we want to make sure that we are aware of all this data, especially if there are key interest rate decisions out. And in this current market climate, we can see that there are many monetary policy meetings, right? And as a result of this, and even inflation data, it's affecting this currency movements. So after this, after the economic calendar, we will go on to the trade setups and review. So for the trade setups, we will be covering mainly on Euro dollar and pound dollar. For the trade reviews, we are doing mainly on Aussie and gold, right? So this is basically a review of the call that were made on Wednesday. And then finally, we have our Q&A session as well, right? So if you guys have any questions or any charts that you want us to look at, right, just put them under the chat box and we'll take a look at them together. So before we hop on to the trade review, right, let's just take a look at the economic calendar. Let me just bring that up in a second. Okay, so you can either use Forex Factory or Vantage. Just go to vantagemarkets.com. And under education and tools, right, you can see this economic calendar here. So I focus mainly on the G7 currencies, right? So on the economic calendar, you can see that these are the key events and the colors are categorized according to the impact of the news. So for example, on the left, you can see that this would be the currency that is related to the data release. And then in the next column, you have the different colors, right? Basically gray, red, as well as amber. So this tree would represent the different impacts. So the ones in red would be the ones with higher impact, and the ones in amber would be the medium impact, and the ones in gray would be the one with the least impact. So these are the ones, and you can see that usually the ones that hold the highest impact would be the ones, for example, like your monetary policy meeting, or even inflation data. So inflation, jobs report, retail sales, right? So these are the ones that generally hold more weight. So this would be the economic calendar. So let's take a look at what we have for today. So for today, this is, so we currently at 4:30, we have ECB President Lagarde's speech, right? So over here, right? So ECB President Lagarde, she will be looking at, this would mainly affect the ECB, right? So essentially on their stance. So in the previous monetary policy meeting, we saw that they took on a 75 basis point rate hike. And in the coming meeting, likely that we will be seeing an additional 75 basis point hike as well for next month. This is probably a high reason of it is really because of inflation, right? So in the Eurozone, it's facing supply-driven inflation. And this is highly attributed to the supply constraints, right? Mainly on energy prices. So if inflation remains high, right, it's likely that ECB would have to raise interest rates further just to stem inflation. So this would be on the calendar. So let me just go back. So you can see this data, right? We also have a few other data that's out for the Eurozone on the CPI data here, as well as the CAD. So CAD and dollar. So this is what we will be looking at. I believe it's later today. So yeah, so mainly on dollar and CAD as well. So now that we have take a look at the economic data, right? You can see that the key events, or rather the news release, would be impacting mainly on your dollar and your CAD. Let's hop onto our chart, right? So we'll be doing a review of the charts. So let's take a look at this. So on Wednesday, we did two calls, right? One on Aussie dollar as well as gold, right? So let's take a look at them. And then following that, I'll be showing you guys two setups that I'm waiting for on euro dollar as well as pound dollar. So if you guys have any setups as well, right, do put them under the chat box and we'll take a look at them together. So let's first go through on Aussie dollar. Okay, so let's take a look at Aussie dollar. Okay, so this is the setup on Aussie dollar. So over here, right, on the higher time frame first. So in this case, price wick above it. So in this region, right, we have on the weekly time frame, prices sitting on this support and resistance area. You can see here, right? So essentially price coming in to test this region. Let me just remove the magnet mode. So over here, right, so essentially price coming in to test this region as a support and then failing and retesting this region again as a resistance. And right now it's sitting on this region again here, right? So this is on the weekly time frame. We also did a Fibonacci retracement, right? So recall that when we want to do Fibonacci retracement to find support, we are basically waiting for a strong push up and a retracement. So when we use Fibonacci retracement to find support, we are identifying the move here, right? The strong push up before that retracement, and using the lows and highs, this is where we will be taking them as the reference points. So the low here and the high here, and you can see the pullbacks, right? So essentially what we did is that we took a retracement with this low and ending at this high. And this is how we found the 50% retracement here. So you can see that price came in and wicked it the first time over here. So if I zoom into this chart, you can see that price came in, essentially it respected this zone once, pushed higher, and right now we're seeing a break and a wick below this area, right? So strong bearish Aussie move here, partly also because of the stronger dollar. So if you look at, just sidetrack a little, right? Let's just take a look at dollar index first. So you can see that dollar index on the weekly, right, still continuing on its move up. And if you look at it on the daily as well, the market is still bullish, right? So it's still holding above this demand area that we've highlighted. I believe this is on the 4 hours. So this blue zone, right? So it's still holding onto this demand area. We saw that strong push up. It broke the resistance area that we've highlighted here as well and still continuing higher. And this one is partly driven by the number one, the CPI data, right? So CPI data came in better than expected. But this also means is that it could pave the way for more Fed hikes, because inflation is Fed's main goal right now, essentially bringing inflation back to the 2% target range. So as long as inflation continues to climb, right, we can see interest rate push higher. So that's one. And then the other one, it's also the retail sales data. So if we take a look at, let me just go on to the Forex Factory just to show you this, right? So on this week itself, we can see that there is a bunch of data that came out, right? And part of it on the dollar, it's this, right? So mainly on the retail sales. So August retail sales data, as well as the unemployment claims data. So what it shows us on Monday, or rather on Tuesday, is that CPI data, which essentially measures inflation, right? So inflation still remains high. So even if we exclude energy and food prices, if we look at core CPI data, right, it's still standing at 0.6% month on month, which means that it actually grew 0.6%, right? And this actually went beyond the market forecast. So market's only expecting a 0.3% rise, but price actually grew by 0.6%. That's one. And then on top of that, right, your domestic growth, right? So essentially the domestic outlook on US still remains strong. You can see this from the retail sales data. So it actually recovered, right, with a 0.3% growth. Unemployment numbers also rose. Unemployment claims also rose. Also fell, right? So this is good for the, it's strong for the dollar. So when your labor market as well as your domestic growth is still strong, when you have such strong CPI inflation data, essentially it could push the Fed to raise rates higher without impacting too much on growth. So on that, right, you can see that dollar pushed higher, and you can see the strong push up here. Right, so this one, it's driven mainly by the CPI data release, and we saw this slight hesitation before price continue higher, driven by this retail sales data. So this is on the dollar, right? But just on the technical front alone, you can see that in terms of market structure, it's still on a bullish market structure, a slight pullback into this demand area on the 4 hours, and right now prices are still on the upside. There's something else to keep in mind on the higher time frame on dollar index is that if you go to the, I believe, the monthly time frame, right, this was the resistance area that we've highlighted earlier, right? So essentially you can see this area, price came in and it interacted with this as a resistance and then as a support over here. And right now it's sitting on this region again. And also in line with that, right, if you do your Fibonacci retracement, so earlier I covered on Fibonacci retracement to find support, right? Right now we're looking at how we can use Fibonacci retracement to find resistance. So when we want to use Fibonacci retracement to find resistance, essentially we're looking at a strong push down here and a retracement after. So this is the opposite, right? So if you want to find support, you're waiting for push up and that retracement, and we'll be using the low as the starting point and the high as the ending point. But when you want to use Fibonacci retracement to find resistance, you are using the high as the starting point and the low as the ending point. So this is the main difference, right, in terms of how we use Fibonacci retracement to find support and resistance. So with that, right, you can see here there is a strong push down and then this pullback up here. So this is the retracement level, right? So starting from the high and then the low. So when we did a retracement of this move, you can see that this is how we did the 78.6 retracement, where prices are currently sitting on this zone. So on the monthly, right, it's sitting on potential resistance. But if you go down to the smaller time frame, there's still no change in market structure. You can see that prices are still in a bullish market structure. And this is especially on the daily. So you can see that on the daily time frame, right, this is very strong or very, very clear highs and lows being formed here. Price also broke above the high, right? So this is still on the daily. So within this leg itself, as long as price pulls back, we could still anticipate more upside. And also given the dollar fundamental, it's more bullish, right, with the rate hikes. So yeah, so this is on dollar, right? So the reason why I talked about dollar index is because if you look at Aussie dollar, right, so back to our Aussie dollar chart. So you can see Aussie dollar, right? Essentially, it's sitting on this weekly support area. So price pushed up once and then it came and tapped into this region again. And just remove this area. So over here, you can see that reaction. And then this is where we zoom in onto the chart. So we highlighted this zone, I believe, on the 1 hour time frame, right? So this area here. So we highlighted this region. So this as the support. So price back on Wednesday, it's somewhere here, 14 September. This is at about 4 p.m. So 8 p.m. So it's around here, right? So we saw price came into this region, tap into this area itself, right? So this is the area, the support area that we've identified. So we say that there could be more upside confirmation, or rather there's more upside when price comes into this region, this area here. But you can see that this is just a wick above it. So price just wick above it, and then afterwards it failed, right? Mainly also driven by the strong dollar. So Aussie dollar by itself, right? So dollar is the denominator, right? So when dollar strengthen, you can see that Aussie dollar will drop, right? So if you look at AUD/USD, right? So dollar is the denominator. So when dollar strengthen, especially with the recent move that we saw earlier, what this shows is that Aussie could drop. So this is the idea, right? So coming into this region, you can see that when price came in here, we highlighted this area as a resistance. So this region over here, this is the resistance area, right? And how so we saw that reaction. So what we're waiting for is a clear break and close above this region and a retest of it as a support. But you can see that this just failed after. So price came in, right? It did not, this move did not play out. So this is one, right? And if you go down to the smaller time frame, so this is on a 1 hour time frame, and you can see that this is the upside confirmation that we have, right? If you go down to the 15 minutes time frame, this region over here, so let me just remove this. Right, so on this region itself, you can see that when price interacted with this area, we have an area here, right? So I actually took a short-term position over here when we saw this move up. So I'll just run through how this position is taken. So essentially over here, we have a support area, right? So price came in, tapped into the support area. We are waiting for a break above this upside confirmation in order to take a further push up. But you can see that in this case, right, back where we were somewhere here, right? So this region, there was 14th September, 8 p.m. So it was here. So we were here when we saw this moves, right? So this region over here. So essentially, this is on the 15 minutes time frame, right? So we can see this structure. So this is the area that we're targeting because we're not anticipating a break above it, right? This is the region that we're waiting for a break above. So this would be the target, right? So this is one area. If you go down to the smaller time frame, so currently this region that we have, this area itself, this is on the 1 hour, right? So I'm just going to label this on the 1 hour. And then on the 5 minutes time frame, so this would be on the smaller time frame, but I thought it would be nice to just show you guys roughly how it's like, right? So on this region itself, on the 5 minutes, you can see that what we have over here, it's that price came in, right? And basically it respected this area. So what this region here, right? So we have demand, prices sitting on demand. This area here, you can see price came in once, it pushed higher, and then it revisited this blue H1 demand area that we have, that we saw here. So once price comes into this area, right, if you take a look at what we have on the left, which is basically this region, right? Take a look at this region. If I were to paint out this move, you notice that coming into this region, right, prices are forming your lower lows and lower highs. You can look at it, if you want to look at it in line chart, that works as well. But you can see essentially, right, clear lows and highs being formed. So price pushing into this region with a lower low and lower high, right? So you can mark this out. You can see this successive lower highs and lower lows being formed here. And then following which, what happens is that price broke above it, right? And what you see is a clear break above the last high that we have here. So what it tells me here is that when price comes into the support area and we see this clear break above the high, it tells me that on the short-term time frame, right, demand is possibly in control. And this is formed with, so demand is in control because of the break here. You can see this region, right? This is the last high and price broke above the last high, this high here. The price broke above the last high, retest this region again as a support area, and you can see this area itself, right? So this is the support area that we have here. So just to narrow it down further, so I'll just put this in a different color. Let's just say in pink. Okay, so this is the support area, essentially the area. So depending on what's the time frame that you're using, right, it's basically the area that caused this high to fail. So if you go to the 10 minutes time frame, you can see that this is basically the candle, right? So the candle that holds within this area before this blue line fails. So you can see this region, right? So this area here, and then this pullback into this area, right? So what you can do, it's on the shorter term time frame. Essentially, you can go down to the smaller time frame if you want to, right? If you're familiar with it, potentially even on a 1 minute time frame, essentially taking the longs on these areas that cause supply to fail. So this would be your last demand area here. Stop loss just lying slightly below this region, right? And you can target this high as one, and then and this area, so this region. So when price comes into this region itself, right, I took I believe 50% of the position over here on this high, and then I protected the position, right, trailing, which I got trailed out after. So basically moving it to break even, or if you want to trail it based on the structure, right? So if you can see, this is the last structure, so price should not be breaking below this low, so you can trail it according to this low as well. So this is the setup, right? But you can see that the one that we're waiting for here, the break above it, right? Price broke above this region, but after that, what we have is that a clear break above, retest as support, and price just push much lower, right? Partly driven by the dollar as well. So if you take a look at where we are currently right now on Aussie dollar, so the same areas that we've highlighted, right? This didn't change, it's still support area on the H1. So let me just remove all these markings because they are no longer relevant. So I'll just remove all this, right? So let's take a look at this a fresh analysis here. So you can see this region, right? So this is still the support area. Okay, so this is still the support area that we have. Over here, so you can see essentially price came in, tested this region, right? This is the support, and even if you look at it just in terms of support resistance areas, right, you can see how price came in and interacted with this zone and eventually failing, right, closing below this area and retesting as a resistance. So this is the area. But currently where it is now, there isn't any nice setup for me. You can see that prices are in still a bearish market structure with the lower lows and lower highs being formed. It also broke the previous low, right? So right now, this would be the leg that I'm focusing on. So I'm waiting for price to either pull back into this region on the 1 hour, right? So this will probably be next week just to see how price play out. But where it is currently now, there isn't any setup for me, right? But this is the region that I would watch. So once we have this support and resistance area, another thing that we can highlight as well, right? You can see that there is potentially this descending trend line that's being formed, price respecting this region here, right? So in order for a trend line to be valid, we need at least 2 taps. So you can see price coming in to test this region once, twice, once over here, second time here, and then the third time over here, right? So as long as price holds below this resistance, and this descending trend line, right, I think there's room for more downside. So on the Fibonacci retracement, what we can do is that we have identified the move, right? So this is the push down. If we do see a pullback, right, then this would be the region. So what you can do is take a Fibonacci retracement of the move from high to low here. Right, same thing, open up the key retracement level. So these are all the default levels that we have, right? So in this setup alone, I would say that the 50% would be the area that I will watch. And the reason for that is because it's within the support and resistance area, that's one. And if you zoom in or narrow down to this region itself here, you can see that this was also the previous resistance area, right, where we saw this strong push or rejection of this. So there's a 50% retracement, right? And if you take a Fibonacci extension. So Fibonacci extensions, they are basically zigzag patterns, right? So if you want to look for Fibonacci extension for resistance, you want to find patterns that look like this or patterns that look like this. So in this example, you can see that the first pattern will correspond more to what we have on the chart. So this is the pattern and these are the 3 points. So we'll be using these 3 points as the reference points, right, to find our Fibonacci extension. So the first point here, second point here, and third point here. So generally, I would use the 61.8, 78.6, and 100. So these are the 3 common ones that I use. You can see in this example, right, the 78.6 itself. Let me just put it in a different color, right? In this case, this lines up with the resistance area that we have found. Okay, so this is on Aussie dollar. I'm just waiting for a pullback into this region. So we'll take a look at it probably maybe on Tuesday just to see how this how is it like, right, if price actually pulls back into this region. If not, right, there isn't any setup at the moment. So this is on Aussie dollar, right? And the other one that I want to go through is on gold. So on Wednesday, we took a look at gold, right? So let's review gold. So on gold, right, this is currently what we have, right? So on the higher time frame first, so gold as well, it's also pushing much lower because of your dollar. So in this case, you can see on the daily time frame price, maybe before the daily time frame, let's go to the weekly time frame first. So on the weekly time frame, what we have here, it's basically an ascending trend line. You can see here, right? On the weekly time frame, it's this region, which now price broke below. Right? You can see that this was the previous support area that we have over here on the weekly time frame. And we also highlighted a retracement level, which is the 61.8 retracement. And the retracement is taken from this move. You can see the strong push up and the retracement here. So this is the low that we're using, and this is the high. So this is the retracement level, right? So this is on the weekly time frame. When we go to the daily, right, we highlighted that daily it's more bearish. Why? Because if you look at just the recent moves, right, focus on this recent moves, you can see that prices are forming bearish market structure with lower lows and lower highs being formed. It is also holding below resistance, right? This was the previous support area that we saw, and price broke and retested as a resistance. That's one. And then more importantly, also on the daily, you can see that there is a clear break and retest of this ascending trend line. So over here, you can see price coming in to test this region multiple times. It held and then it broke and retested as a resistance. So this was the bearish bias, right? And on the smaller time frame, let's go to the 4 hours. So on the 4 hours, we highlighted this demand area, and also that prices are still sitting on this weekly support, right? So this was the demand area that we highlighted on the 4 hours. If you go down to the 1 hour time frame, you can see this region, or rather, I believe the 30 minutes. Yeah, so this region here. So back when we saw this chart, we were somewhere here in time. You can see that this on the 30 minutes, right? Essentially, this is the candle where we saw that hesitation for price pushed up, right? And let me just go down to the 15 minutes so that we're able to see this clearer. So basically on Go, what happened is that we didn't have the upside confirmation that we wanted, so there wasn't any trades triggered. So essentially over here, you can see that this is the demand area. And with this candle itself, you can see this is basically the last candle. You see this hesitation. So this is the last candle where we saw this hesitation before price pushed up much higher. And following that, you can see that essentially, right, this is the area that price came and revisited as a demand. So when we talk about demand and supply, right, in our previous Thursday session, this is how we can apply them. So you can see that price came in, tested demand area, and you can see this move itself, right? So price actually came in and tested this region. So if you have to extend this level across, you can see that this is the last candle that held within the region. And the reason why it's important to identify this candle is because we use this candle's high as our upside confirmation. So recall on Wednesday, right, we wanted to wait for a clear break and close below this 1712.13 before taking a bullish bias. But you can see in this case, this didn't happen. So this is why it's important to wait for the break above the upside in order to confirm the bullish bias, right? Given that prices are sitting on a demand area, and if price breaks above this upside, what this shows us is that demand, it's holding, right? And demand is in control for us to play a further move up. But this is not what we saw, right? You can see that on this region itself, price came in, right? So, okay, so I've got your question, Trong. So let me just take a look at it in a moment, yeah? So in this area, you can see essentially, right, this is the high, price did not break above this region, so no trades were triggered here, and then following which there was a clear break below this region, a retest again as a resistance, and price just went much lower after. Okay, so I have a question, right? So a lot of people, including me, affected by this broken market structure, but on weekly chart, it is marked double top. Tesco can go below 1600. So let's take a look at that, right? So on the weekly chart. Oops. So this is the weekly chart, right? Is it marked double top? Okay, I'm guessing your double top is, are you looking at this? So there are two areas, right? So I think it's this. Are you looking at this region? This is the double top. This is the one that you're looking at, or is this area here? So let me just clear all these drawings, right? So this is the double top that I see over here, right? But I'm not too sure if you're referring to this area as the double top, or if you're referring to this one, though I would not consider this, right? Because this is a huge region, but you can see that there is this neckline and a clear break and close below this area as well. So in all, right, I would say that yes, it's more bearish, especially maybe not so much of a double top, right? You can also consider this, right? So this area. So this is the resistance area that we saw. twice rejection, and then now there is a clear break and close below. But keep in mind that this is on the weekly chart, right? So if we want to wait for a break and close below for more bearish move down, we need to wait for price to close on the weekly time frame first. So right now this week hasn't ended yet, right? So depending on how this candle play out, but in general I would say yes, right? Because if you look at it just in terms of support resistance areas as well, right, this zone itself, so this zone itself is demand area, and right now price wick below it multiple times, and we saw a clear break below. So depending on how this candle closed. So from 2020 until now, it's not double top from, right? 2020. So this area, yeah, I would say that until this breaks, price breaks and close below, right? This isn't, I would not consider this a double top. And it's a bit, I would say a bit wide for it to be a double top, right? So you can see that I would consider this area more of, you can see this push down, you can see probably from the weekly, right? So this area itself. So essentially price coming up to this region and then forming a double top, a clear break and close below the neckline. In this case, right, you can see that there wasn't a retest of the neckline. So I would consider this area as the double top. Okay. So this would be on the weekly time frame, right? If you go to the monthly, I would say that you probably see a clearer, yeah. On the monthly, this is clearer, right? Essentially this region. So not so much on the weekly, but if you see on the monthly, right, essentially this is your neckline. And if you go to the line chart, you can see this area as well. So the first top, second top, and right now clear break and close below the neckline. So depending on how this month closes, I would say. Okay. So yeah, this is on the higher time frame. You can see even ignoring the chart pattern, right? Even if you look at it in terms of the daily, you can see bearish market structure being formed as well. With this move, right, this is the last clear break of the low. So now, right now, right, this would be the last leg. If we do see any pullback within this region itself, then again, we want to identify resistance areas. You can see this area. This is one where price came in, tested this region as both a support and resistance. Here, right? But this would be, let's revisit this setup again, because this is on the daily, right? So it will take a while if price were to retrace into this region. So this is on gold, right? So essentially the setup essentially just showing you guys the review that we did on Wednesday. Okay, so I'll show you guys two other setups I'm waiting for, right? So on euro dollar as well as pound dollar. So let's take a look at euro dollar. Right, so on euro dollar, let's start from the daily time frame first. So on the daily time frame where we are now, you can see that there's again, right, bearish market structure being formed. If you look at it just in terms of the highs and lows, right, just painting out the highs and lows, sorry for this, you can see this region. So essentially price broke the previous low, and now we're within this leg itself where we saw the pullback. So on this pullback, what we have also is that if you look at the interactions between demand and supply areas, again over here, you can see this region, right? So this is the area price came in as a demand area here. You can see that I took again the last week. So maybe let me just put this in a different color in gray so that you can see it clearer in terms of the interactions between prices. So let's take a look at this, right? So let me just turn on the magnet mode as well so that I'm able to capture the lows nicely. So this area here, and then the low here as well. So you can see this area, right? So price came in, essentially, it tested the support region here, and then failed. So this is now the support and resistance area. So you see the interaction. The price came in as demand and then failing this region and retesting this region as a resistance. So this is one. And following this, price reversed much lower, right? So on this move itself, you can also take a Fibonacci retracement, right? Just a quick recap on the retracement. If we want to use it to find resistance, we will be starting from the high and ending at the low. So let's take a look at that, right? So starting at the high here and ending at the low. Okay, so as long as this is the lowest point, which means that prices did not break beyond this point, this retracement level is valid. If price breaks and form a new low, right, then this retracement that I drew, this itself would not be valid. You need to readjust the retracement, taking the last move, starting from the high and ending at the lowest point that's formed. But you can see that this is where prices are currently at, right? So it hasn't break the last low, the reference point that we found here. So this is still a valid retracement. Same thing, right? Open up the key level so you can see the 61.8 retracement. Prices coming into this region, testing this retracement, right, and pushing lower. So for me on euro dollar, it's still more bearish, right? This is on the daily picture. If you go to the 4 hours picture, you can see over here, right, the recent move that we have on the 4 hours is this region over here. Again, resistance and support area. You can see this area, or rather probably this move here, right? Just a general area where price interacted with one another. you can see, right, essentially, if I were to draw out this move, right, essentially price coming in to test as resistance twice. You see this sharp push and then price breaking and retesting this level as a support before pushing higher. You can look at it in terms of line chart as well. It's clear in terms of line chart. Again, right, price coming into test as a resistance over here and then breaking and closing and retesting this region that we've highlighted as a support before it continues on the upside. So for me, this would be a clear interaction, right? All these interactions over here. So this is the resistance area I'm waiting for. In terms of where we can see this, right? So again, I'm waiting for price to pull into this region. When price enters this region, right, we have this area. You can also have potentially, right? So I would not highlight this as an important factor because this is not a valid trend line yet because it's just 2 touches. Okay, but potentially a descending trend line. But what's more important is that again, retracement of this move, you can see this move depending on where price pulls back. So if it pulls back from here, then we can start from the high here and end at the low. So let's take a look at that, right? So Fibonacci retracement of this move from high to low, and you can see that the 38.2% lines up with this region. So this gray area that we have, right? And what you can also do is your Fibonacci extension. So Fibonacci extension, again, there's zigzag patterns. In this case, right, this would be the zigzag pattern. So again, to find resistance, we have this pattern or this pattern here. So you can see that this pattern itself will correspond more to what we have on the chart setup. So this would be the pattern. Once we've identified the pattern, use these 3 turning points that we have over here as reference points. So 1, 2, 3, and we'll try and see if we can project any extension levels. So with that, right, the point 1, point 2, the high, and then the last point. So one thing to keep in mind is that if prices form lower low, you do need to adjust the extension levels, right? So currently this is the lowest point, which is why I'll be taking this point. But if price push lower, then you will have to adjust the extension levels accordingly. So it has to be the lowest point. You can see that in this case, right, the 61.8 extension, this region, right? So this, the one in blue, lines up with this area. So the idea is just basically trying to find key support resistance areas or supply demand zones and using these extensions retracement levels and trying to see if there are more levels that line up on this region, because then this presents a higher probability setup. Okay, so this is the region I'm waiting for price to enter, right? So once price taps into this region on the 4 hours, I will go down to the smaller time frame, either on the 30 minutes or M15, right? So same thing, because coming into this region, if price push into this region, but it should show its bullish market structure coming into this, I'm just waiting for a change in market structure. Once price enters this region, if there is no change in market structure, I won't be taking the trade on the shorter time frame. So this is on the area that we're watching for, right, on the 4 hours right now. In terms of the target, you can target this area here. So essentially, you can see this area. So this region is the one that drove prices into, oops, right? So this region is the one that drove prices into the resistance, this area that we have over here. So in terms of the target, right, I would target this area. You can see that this was basically the last candle that we have before we see that strong push up. So this would be the demand area. So this is what I'm expecting right here. But a lot of it would depend on how price play out, right, on the smaller time frame coming into this region. So again, right, when price comes into this region, I want to see some kind of reversal on the smaller time frame before taking the shots. So yeah, so these are just zones that we're highlighting, right? We probably will not see this move until next week. So let's just review them again. So this is my view on euro dollar. I think overall it's small bearish, right? So this is on euro dollar. And the last one that we want to show would be on pound dollar. So let's take a look at pound dollar. So pound dollar on, okay, let's take a look at this region here. Let me load a different setup. Okay, so this is what we have on pound dollar. Let me just remove that. So you can see on the daily time frame, right? Again, prices are just making new lower lows and lower highs. There isn't anything much, right? On the 4 hours time frame as well. So on pound dollar itself, this is the last support area. You can see this region here. Again, if I have to extend this level across, you can see how price interacted with this. And just catch the top and bottom of the candles. So yeah, this is the candle on the 4 hours. You can see essentially price coming in to interact with this region as a support and then failing, right? So what's interesting to keep in mind for this is that you can see price coming in to test this area, right? So this is the support area that we have, right? And price reacting on this region. So you can see here, right? Even if you have to follow this area, you can see that essentially price came in. Price came in, tapped into this region, and you can see this area over here as well. And it also swept the candle, the previous candle's low, you can see, right? So price essentially on the smaller time frame, you can probably see this. So I just want to focus your attention here. Let's just zoom into this candle. And if you go to the 30 minutes time frame, you can see what we have over here is that essentially price came in and it swept the low of the previous candle. You can see this region, right? So essentially we have this area where price came in, it sweeps the low. Yeah, so if you compare the lows, you just turn on the magnet mode for this, right? So this it's at 821 and this low it's at 803. So price actually swept the low of this area, right? So this is the last demand candle, as you can see over here. Extend this level across, you can see, right? So again, interaction of demand and supply, you can see how this region plays out. There is demand area, price came in, interacted with demand area. You can see this region, interacted with demand area, and then it failed. When demand fails, right, according to what we have covered on Thursday session, when demand failed, it created supply region. So this case, right, you can see that price came in, and on that failure of the demand, it created a supply region, which is this area here. Right? Because this is the candle that still holds within the region. You can see this is the candle that holds within the region before it fails. And following this, price came in, tapped into this candle before it continued to the downside. So this is the picture on the smaller time frame. But if you just stretch this zone across, right, ignoring all these interactions, you can see that price failed as well. So this is just the support and resistance areas, right? So if you don't want to go into supply demand interaction of this candle, you can see that this is basically just support and resistance areas. So I'm just waiting for price to re-enter into this region. And again, right, go down to the smaller time frame. So this is the region that I would watch, right? In terms of the target right now, there isn't any target that we have, not on the 4 hours or the daily. So if you look at it on the daily picture, you can see that price also broke below the previous low that we have over here. If you look at it on the daily, you can see that this is the close, right? So right now we're seeing a break below this region. In terms of where I would target this, right? One region to consider, depending on the pullback. So this really depends on where price pulls back. But in this case itself, right, if price pulls back to this region, you can see that this is the last leg. If we do see a pullback here, so what I would do is to basically take a retracement of the move, right, depending on where the pullback is. So you do have to adjust it if price forms a new low, but this is the idea, right? Taking the move starting from the high here, ending at the low, and then opening up the key levels. In this case, you can see that. So usually, right, these are the default levels. So let me just put the default levels. So you can see this region, right? So in the previous session, I shared as well, right, on how we can use the 78.6 and 61.8 retracement and using the -27 as the target. So in this region, right, if we do see a pullback here, you can see, right, the region that lines up with the retracement, it's the 61.8. So this area here. So I'm just waiting for price to pull back into this region. If we do see a pullback over here, and if that is the case, right, then it creates a support area for our target as the first target, and then -27 as the second target. So yeah, so a lot of it would depend on how price pan out over here. So this is the setup I'm waiting for on pound dollar, right? Depending on how price play out. I'm just waiting for a pullback into this region, and then again on the smaller time frame before taking any shots. So this is what we have on pound dollar, right? So in this case, if price pulls back from this region here, then it creates a support area. So depending on whether we see a pullback here, then it will create a new support area as our profit as well as partial target. Okay, so with that, we have, I believe, come to the end of the setups that we want to cover. Okay, so we covered on euro dollar, pound dollar. On Wednesday, we'll be doing a review of them, right? So for those of you guys who are new to the sessions, right, we do have our schedule on vantagemarkets.com/webinars. So essentially, right, what it shows over here is that we are able to see the different topics that are being covered. So on Wednesdays and Thursdays, this is when we will be covering more on our live setups, right? So trade setups we're looking at, we're also doing a trade review of the setups. And then on Thursdays, we're covering on specific topics. So you'll be able to check the schedule, right, on vantagemarkets.com/webinars. So you're able to see what we have, right? So this is basically what we have for the week, right? Thanks everyone. Trade safe, stay safe, have a great weekend, and we will catch you guys again next week. So thank you and goodbye.